Wedding morning, my fiancée smirked. Half of this is mine now. Walk away and watch me take it all. After I caught her. My name is Brendan. I'm 29, and on the morning of my wedding, I should have been nervous about vows or the ceremony, not about whether the woman I was about to marry was lying to my face. Yet that's where I found myself. I didn't wake up with butterflies in my stomach. I woke up with suspicion gnawing at me, the kind that doesn't let you breathe right. It started with the buzzing of her phone. Caroline had always been careless about silencing it, but that morning it was different. Her phone lit up over and over again on the nightstand, screen glowing in the half-dark. At first, I told myself not to check. I tried to close my eyes again, but the buzzing came like clockwork every minute. Curiosity, no. Paranoia, one. The contact name flashing wasn't a normal one. Not Mom, or Taylor, or work. It was saved as studio. Caroline wasn't an artist. She didn't record music. She had no business being in any studio. The first message read, "Last night was perfect. Can't believe you still went through with the rehearsal." Another buzz. "Don't forget me when you're standing up there with him." My chest tightened. I scrolled further. The conversation stretched back weeks. Late-night messages, private jokes, and words no woman about to marry someone should ever send. They weren't just friendly notes. These were loaded, intimate, and full of the kind of familiarity that only comes from meeting often. I didn't storm out of bed. I didn't shout. I just sat there, letting the ugly truth sink in. She had been cheating, or at the very least, hiding someone so close that he felt entitled to call her the night before our wedding. My first instinct was flight. Cancel the whole thing. Walk away. Spare myself the humiliation of saying vows that had already been broken. I put on my shirt slowly, trying to keep my hands from shaking. My suitcase wasn't even zipped yet. We were supposed to leave straight for a short honeymoon right after the ceremony. As I started gathering clothes, Caroline stirred, blinking awake. She saw me standing there by the closet, holding her phone. For a split second, her face flickered with guilt. But it was gone so fast I almost thought I imagined it. "You're up early," she said, voice still thick with sleep. I didn't answer. I showed her the screen. Her eyes darted to the messages, then back to me. Not a hint of panic. No begging me to listen, no rush to explain. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and smirked. "So you snooped through my phone now?" That was it. That was her defense. Not denial, not shame, accusation. I told her I wasn't marrying someone who thought sneaking around the week of her wedding was acceptable. I grabbed my tie, stuffed it into the suitcase, and said I was leaving before I made a bigger mistake. That was when she got up. She wasn't crying or pleading. She moved slowly, deliberately, like someone who had already rehearsed this scene in her mind. She opened the drawer of the bedside table and pulled out a thin folder. It was a manila file I recognized immediately, the prenup. She held it like a weapon, flipping it open and tossing it onto the bed. Pages fanned out, covered in neat, legal wording. "Go ahead," she said, her voice steady, almost amused. "Leave. But remember, half of this is mine now. You'll be crawling back when you realize you can't afford that life without me." Her words froze me more than the betrayal. I stared at the documents. We had signed a prenup months earlier, drafted by my lawyer friend Miles, designed to keep our finances separate. Caroline hadn't been happy about it, but she signed because she wanted the wedding to move forward. The whole point was to protect what I had worked for before we ever met. Yet as my eyes scanned the lines in front of me, I saw phrases I didn't remember. Terms about shared assets, clauses about spousal entitlement if separation happened after the wedding. It was all written so smoothly, it looked legitimate. But I knew those conditions hadn't been in the version I signed. I picked up one page, my hands trembling now. Caroline crossed her arms, smirking like a gambler who just laid down a winning card. "You think you're the one with power here? You walk out, and I make sure you regret it. Lawyers will tear you apart. Your accounts, your apartment, even that little brokerage account you're so proud of, it all becomes leverage. Do you really want to explain to your family why you gave it all up because of some text messages you misunderstood?" Her confidence scared me more than the cheating itself. She wasn't just bluffing. She had something she believed was airtight, a trap I hadn't seen coming. I asked myself one question. How? How had the prenup I signed months ago suddenly turned into this? Had she swapped the papers? Had she tampered with the safe in my office where I kept a copy? The version she threw at me was convincing, but the wording wasn't mine. I shut the suitcase again, not because I planned to stay, but because I realized walking out without answers would hand her exactly what she wanted. If she really had forged or tampered with the contract, she was expecting me to run, panic, and leave her with legal ammunition. She picked up the folder, slid it back into the drawer, and said casually, "So what's it going to be? You want to ruin your own wedding and throw away everything you built? Or you want to stand up straight, smile for the pictures, and let me handle things the way I planned?" The audacity left me speechless. I didn't respond. I just looked at her, trying to understand how the woman I thought I was marrying could sit there, half-dressed, smirking at the idea of robbing me. She wasn't panicking because she never intended to walk down the aisle for love. She intended to walk down the aisle for leverage. I walked into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. This wasn't a decision I could make on impulse. If I left, I had to be certain she couldn't come after me legally. If I stayed silent, I had to find proof that the prenup was tampered with. When I walked back into the room, Caroline was already scrolling through her phone, calm as ever. She didn't care that I'd seen the messages. She didn't care that I knew the truth. All that mattered to her was that she believed she had me cornered, bound by paper and ink that no longer matched what I remembered signing. That morning, I stopped being just a groom. I became something else entirely, a man who realized he was sleeping next to someone capable of betrayal on two fronts, love and law. I didn't storm out. I didn't shout. I zipped the suitcase quietly, sat down on the edge of the bed, and told her I needed to take a walk. She shrugged like it didn't matter. To her, the game was already won. But as I left the room and the hotel hallway swallowed me up, I knew one thing. If she had really tampered with my contract, then this wasn't just heartbreak. This was war. And wars aren't won by storming out. They're won by patience, by collecting proof, and by waiting for the right moment to strike. Caroline thought she had trapped me with paper. What she didn't realize was that she had just handed me the reason to fight back. I didn't walk aimlessly that morning. Every step I took down the hotel corridor was measured, deliberate, like a chess piece sliding into position. Caroline thought she had me cornered with words written on a page, but I wasn't going to fight her in that suite, half awake and unprepared. If she really had swapped the prenup, I needed proof, and the only way to get it was to retrace my steps. By the time I reached the parking lot, the early sun was cutting through the haze, painting the cars gold. My suit jacket felt heavy over my arm, not because of the fabric, but because of what I carried in my head. I unlocked my car, slid into the seat, and sat there gripping the steering wheel. I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I landed on Miles. Miles wasn't just a friend. He was the one who drafted the original prenup. He was 2 years older, a sharp attorney who specialized in contracts. If anyone could confirm whether what I saw in that folder was real, it was him. When he picked up, his voice was groggy. "You're calling me at 7:30 on your wedding day?" I cut him off. "She swapped it, Miles. The prenup. She showed me a version that says she gets half if I walk." There was silence on the other end. Then, in a lower tone, "Bring it to me. Now." I didn't waste time explaining. I started the engine and drove to my office. Caroline probably assumed I'd just cool off and come back, ready to put on a smile for the guests. That assumption was the one advantage I had left. When I reached the office, the building was mostly empty. Saturday mornings don't attract employees to downtown. I took the elevator up, the hum echoing in the silence, and walked into my corner office. My safe was hidden behind a cabinet, nothing high-tech, just a fireproof lockbox, but secure enough for personal documents. I spun the combination, tugged the handle, and pulled it open. The folder was there. At first, relief washed over me. Maybe I was imagining everything. Maybe the original was still here, untouched. But when I pulled it out and flipped open the pages, my stomach dropped. It wasn't my prenup. The wording matched the one Caroline had thrown at me. Spousal entitlement, shared assets, the works. Gone was the crisp language Miles had drafted to protect me. Instead, this document made me look like a fool who had handed her half my life on a silver platter. I slammed the safe shut and leaned against the desk. For the first time that morning, panic threatened to take hold. But I forced myself to breathe. If the original was gone, then she, or someone working with her, had replaced it, which meant there was a window of time when she had access to this office. I opened my laptop and logged into the security feed. The office had cameras in every corridor, though most of the footage was archived. I pulled up the logs for the last month. At first, nothing stood out. Just employees working late, janitors passing through. But 2 weeks ago, around 9 in the evening, I saw something that froze me. Caroline. She was walking down the hallway toward my office, holding a tote bag. She wasn't alone. Beside her was her cousin, Elliot, a law student I never particularly trusted. He had that slick charm that made you think twice about every word he said. They walked directly into my office. Elliot glanced up at the camera once, smirking. Caroline didn't even bother. They disappeared inside for 20 minutes. When they came back out, Caroline was laughing, covering her mouth as if she had just pulled the prank of a lifetime. The feed didn't show what they did inside, but I didn't need it spelled out. They had gone into my office to swap the document. Elliot probably knew enough about contracts to draft a believable forgery. Caroline brought him in as her accomplice. Together, they had set the trap. I saved the clip and forwarded it to myself. Then I called Miles again. When I told him what I found, he didn't sound surprised. I warned you, Brendan. She hated that prenup. She probably thought it was insulting. But forging and substituting it? That's criminal. Can I prove it? Yes. The version I drafted is stored in my system. I have the original draft, timestamps, and even the emails we exchanged when we reviewed it. What you have now is a counterfeit. If she tries to enforce it, she'll go down for fraud. For the first time since the confrontation, I felt my chest loosen. Caroline hadn't won yet. She had played her hand early, confident I'd cave. But she had underestimated me. I locked the forged prenup back in the safe. Evidence. I wasn't going to confront her with it just yet. No, if I wanted to expose her, it had to be public. It had to be undeniable. I left the office and drove straight to Miles' apartment. He met me in a t-shirt, coffee in hand, hair unkempt, but his eyes were sharp. He laid the original draft on the table, side by side with the forged one I brought. See here, he said, pointing to a section. My draft says assets prior to marriage remain separate property. The forged one says assets will be considered marital property upon consummation of the marriage. That's not a typo. That's deliberate alteration. He flipped another page. Here's where I required both parties to keep debts separate. The forged one says debts can be pooled and shared equally. That's Elliot's handiwork. Amateur, but dangerous enough. I sat back, staring at the pages. Caroline wasn't just protecting herself. She was positioning herself to take everything I had worked for, my apartment, my accounts, even liability for debts she hadn't told me about. Miles leaned forward. Listen carefully. Don't confront her yet. Play along. If she thinks she's already won, she'll get careless. Get her to admit it. Record her. I'll be ready to back you legally. But Brendan, you can't marry her. Not after this. I nodded. My resolve hardened. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't walk into that venue blind. By the time I left Miles' place, it was nearly noon. Guests were already starting to gather at the hotel. Caroline had probably texted me by then, wondering where I was. I checked my phone. 6 missed calls, 3 messages. The last one read, "Don't embarrass yourself. Just come back. We'll talk later." No apology. No denial. Just control. Instead of replying, I drove to my brokerage firm. I wanted to make sure nothing else had been tampered with. When I logged into my account, I froze again. A request had been submitted to transfer part of my portfolio into a new account labeled as joint marital funds. It hadn't gone through yet. The system flagged it for manual approval, but the request was sitting there, waiting. She wasn't wasting time. She was accelerating. That discovery rattled me more than anything. The forgery was one thing, but this was active theft. If I hadn't checked, she might have siphoned thousands out under the guise of marital access. I printed the request form, stamped it with the date, and slid it into my folder with the forged prenup. The case against her was building itself. By evening, I returned to the hotel. Caroline was waiting in the lobby, wearing a robe and sipping champagne like she had spent the day at a spa. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. "Decided to come back to your senses?" I didn't answer. I smiled instead. A tight smile, one she mistook for surrender. I leaned down, kissed her cheek, and told her I was tired and needed rest before tomorrow. She bought it. Of course she did. Arrogance was her weakness. She believed the papers were enough to keep me tied down. She didn't realize I had already pulled half the thread loose. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling. My mind wasn't racing anymore. It was calculating. If she could forge contracts, sneak into my office, and attempt to steal from my accounts before we were even married, what would she do after vows? No, I wasn't going to let her win. Tomorrow, at the rehearsal dinner, I would start turning the tables. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a celebration, the calm before the storm of the wedding day. For most couples, it was where families mingled, speeches were made, and everyone toasted the couple's happiness. For me, it was ground zero. I didn't walk into that room thinking of champagne or laughter. I walked in thinking of strategy. I had spent the morning preparing. Miles had given me a small digital recorder, disguised as a pen. It clicked on with a twist of the cap. My plan wasn't reckless confrontation. It was patience. Caroline was arrogant enough to boast, and all I needed was the right moment for her to say out loud what she had already shown with her actions. When I arrived at the private dining room, everyone was already there. Caroline was at the center, glowing in a pale dress, smiling for pictures. She looked like the perfect bride. No one would have guessed that less than 24 hours earlier, she had threatened to bleed me dry. I slipped into my seat beside her, kissed her cheek, and played the part of the adoring groom. My stomach twisted at the act, but I kept my face smooth. Her parents, Charles and Denise, beamed at me, clearly relieved to see me present. They had sensed my absence that morning, though Caroline had surely covered it with some excuse. Dinner began, courses arriving one by one. Laughter filled the room. Toasts were made. Caroline clinked her glass, thanking everyone for coming, her voice sweet and warm. She knew how to perform. It made my skin crawl. Halfway through the meal, as servers cleared plates, I noticed Caroline lean toward her bridesmaid, Tessa, one of her oldest friends. They whispered, giggling. I angled the pen recorder on the table closer, pretending to adjust my napkin. Then I heard it. Caroline's voice, low but distinct. By tomorrow, I'll have the keys, the accounts, the apartment, everything. He doesn't even realize it yet. Tessa laughed nervously. You sound like a villain. Caroline shrugged. Maybe. But after what I've put into this, I deserve it. He's not going anywhere. He can't. Even if he tries, I'll make sure he regrets it. My pulse quickened. She wasn't just admitting the plan, she was reveling in it. That arrogance, that absolute confidence, it was exactly what I needed. I kept my expression neutral, forcing a small laugh at some unrelated joke from across the table. Inside, though, I was coiling tighter and tighter, storing every word. Later, when dessert was served, I excused myself. I told Caroline's parents I wanted to show them something. They followed me into the hallway, puzzled. I pulled out my phone, played them the security footage of Caroline and Elliot entering my office 2 weeks earlier. Charles frowned immediately. That's Caroline. Denise's hand flew to her mouth. What is she doing there? I explained calmly, in as few words as possible, how the prenup had been tampered with, how Elliot, their nephew, had helped, how Caroline planned to use the forgery to seize assets if I tried to walk away. Denise looked pale, whispering, this can't be true. Charles, though, wasn't soft about it. He turned hard, jaw clenched. I paid for half this wedding, he muttered. If what you're saying is true, she's using us too. I didn't push further. I just handed them a copy of the forged prenup alongside the draft Miles had saved. Look for yourselves. Tomorrow, she'll try to play it off. But if you still doubt me, keep this. You'll see soon enough. They didn't say much after that. They went back to the dining room quieter than before, while I lingered in the hall, steadying myself. When I returned, Caroline's eyes locked on me instantly. Her smile didn't falter, but I saw the flicker in her gaze. The flicker of someone who sensed she wasn't in complete control anymore. The rest of the night played out like theater. Caroline laughed, made toasts, posed for photos. I played my part too, arm around her, smiling in every picture. But under the surface, tension thickened. Later, when most guests had left, Caroline cornered me outside the dining room. The air smelled of wine and wilted flowers. She pressed her hand against my chest, voice low. You've been distant all day? Don't think I didn't notice. I looked down at her, expression calm. Maybe I've just been thinking. About leaving? Her tone sharpened, the mask slipping. Because if you're thinking that, don't. You walk away from me, and I'll destroy you. You know I can. Her words cut sharper than any blade. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I slipped my hand into my pocket, clicking the recorder pen back on. Caroline leaned closer, eyes glinting. You think people will believe you if you say I cheated? Please. I'll tell them you were controlling, that you threatened me, that you tried to force me into signing things I didn't understand. Who do you think the courts will believe? A man with money? Or a woman saying she was manipulated? I stayed silent. She filled the silence with venom. You try to ruin me, I'll ruin you faster. Your reputation, your career, I'll take it all. You won't just lose half. You'll lose everything. Her voice echoed in the empty hall. What she didn't realize was that every word was being captured. Every syllable of threat, every ounce of arrogance, immortalized in that pen. I stepped back, forcing a faint smile. You sound sure of yourself. She smirked. I am. You should be too. And with that, she walked back into the dining room, leaving me alone. I leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. She thought she had scared me into silence. What she had really done was hand me the final piece of evidence I needed. When I returned inside, her parents were watching her with new eyes. I saw Charles lean in to whisper something harshly. Caroline's face flushed, but she laughed it off, raising her glass again. She still thought she could bluff her way through. The dinner wrapped up with forced smiles and brittle goodbyes. Guests drifted out, unaware of the undercurrent pulling everything apart. Caroline clung to my arm as we walked to the car, her grip tight, nails digging in slightly. In the quiet of the ride back to the hotel, she broke the silence. You're not leaving me, Brendan. You don't get to. I turned my head, meeting her gaze briefly before focusing back on the road. We'll see. She laughed, the sound hollow. Back in the suite, she went straight to the bathroom, humming as if nothing had happened. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out the recorder, and replayed her words. Hearing them again, in her own voice, was both sickening and liberating. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't suspicion. It was fact. By midnight, I had emailed Miles the audio file along with the footage and the forged prenup scans. His reply came minutes later. This is airtight. You'll walk free, Brendan. She's finished. I slipped the recorder back into my bag, lay down on the bed beside Caroline when she emerged, and pretended to sleep. She nestled in without a care in the world, certain of her victory. But I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, knowing the next day wouldn't end with vows or rings. It would end with Caroline learning what happens when someone builds their future on lies. Morning light spilled through the curtains, casting long stripes across the suite. I hadn't slept. Caroline stirred beside me, yawning, stretching, oblivious. Her world was about to collapse, but she didn't know it yet. She rolled over, kissed my shoulder, and whispered, "This is the day everything changes." She wasn't wrong. I dressed in silence, my suit crisp, my tie knotted. She fussed with her makeup, humming cheerfully as if the night before hadn't happened. Watching her move so casually while knowing what I knew made my skin crawl. She thought she was walking into a ceremony where I'd stand helpless beside her. She thought the forged papers in her drawer would bind me. She thought I'd given up. By 9 o'clock, guests were already filing into the chapel. The venue buzzed with excitement. The hum of conversations, the rustle of dresses, the clink of glasses being arranged for the reception. Caroline was in her dressing room, surrounded by bridesmaids, laughing, posing for photos. I wasn't in mine. Instead, I stood in a quiet office at the back of the venue with Miles and another attorney, Helena, who specialized in fraud cases. On the desk lay a neat folder, the authentic prenup, Miles' time-stamped emails, the footage of Caroline and Elliot sneaking into my office, and the audio of her threats from the rehearsal dinner. It was all organized, undeniable. Helena slid her glasses higher. "You're ready?" I nodded. My throat was dry, but my resolve was iron. "Let's do this." At 10 o'clock sharp, when the wedding was meant to begin, the venue coordinator knocked on Caroline's dressing room door. She opened it, expecting to be called to line up. Instead, Helena stepped inside, flanked by Charles and Denise. Caroline blinked, confused. "What's going on?" Helena's voice was calm, professional. "Miss Sinclair, you are being served notice regarding allegations of contract forgery, attempted fraud, and unauthorized access to financial accounts." She placed the envelope into Caroline's stunned hands. For a moment, Caroline laughed. Actually laughed, as if it were a joke. "This is ridiculous." But Charles wasn't laughing. His face was red with rage. "Tell me it isn't true, Caroline. Tell me you didn't break into his office with Elliot." Her smile faltered. "Dad, Denise cut her off, tears in her eyes. "We saw the footage." Caroline's bridesmaids froze, the room tense, whispers flying. Caroline looked around, desperate, but every eye was on her. She clutched the envelope, tried to rip it, but Helena snatched it back calmly. "Destroying this won't erase the evidence." Caroline's mask cracked. She turned on me when I entered behind them, her voice sharp, shrill. "You set me up." I kept my expression steady. "No, Caroline. You set yourself up. All I did was keep the receipts." She lunged toward me, voice shaking. "You can't do this. You think people will believe you over me? I'll tell them you forced me, that you trapped me." I pulled the pen recorder from my pocket and clicked play. Her own voice filled the room, cold and venomous. "You walk away from me, and I'll destroy you. You know I can." The room went silent. The only sound was her voice, echoing back at her. Bridesmaids stared, horrified. Charles stepped back, disgust written all over his face. Caroline's skin drained of color. She stammered, reaching for the recorder, but I pulled it back. She wasn't in control anymore. By then, venue staff had stepped in, whispering nervously. Guests were starting to notice the delay. Some wandered toward the hall, sensing tension. Caroline's perfect facade was cracking in real time. And then came the final blow. Helena handed Charles the bank transfer request Caroline had submitted to my brokerage firm. "Your daughter attempted to move significant funds without authorization. This document alone could result in criminal charges." Charles looked at Caroline like he no longer recognized her. "You've embarrassed all of us," he said quietly. "This wedding is over." Caroline screamed then. A raw, desperate sound. She tried to lunge at me again, but Denise grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Bridesmaids shuffled awkwardly out of the room, one muttering that she didn't sign up for this drama. The coordinator, pale and shaken, stepped forward. "Should I cancel the ceremony?" "Yes," I said simply. "Cancel it." Word spread fast. Guests murmured. Whispers rippled through the chapel as people realized the bride wasn't coming. Phones buzzed. Photos were snapped. In a matter of minutes, the fairy tale wedding had collapsed into a scandal. Caroline's family hustled her out of the dressing room, her screams echoing down the hallway. "He's lying." All of it's lies. But the recordings, the footage, the documents, all of it said otherwise. By noon, Caroline was gone, escorted out by her own parents, who refused to look at me as they passed. Not because they blamed me, because they were ashamed of her. I stayed behind in the empty chapel, the flowers still fresh, the music still cued, the aisle still waiting. It should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it was the day I dodged a disaster. But it didn't end there. Within a week, the fallout hit hard. Elliot, her cousin, was exposed when the footage reached the dean of his law school. Forgery and fraud aren't the kinds of stains you scrub off a resume. He was expelled immediately. Caroline tried to fight back, of course. She posted online, spinning stories about emotional abuse, claiming I had manipulated her into signing things. But when the audio of her threats leaked, her own voice promising to ruin me, the sympathy she begged for turned into disgust. Comments flooded her pages, not with support, but with outrage. Her job at the marketing firm didn't last either. Employers don't look kindly on staff facing fraud investigations. She was quietly let go within a month. As for the prenup, the courts didn't even entertain her forged version. Miles and Helena dismantled it effortlessly, proving the original draft beyond a doubt. My assets were safe, but Caroline wasn't. Legal charges stuck. Not enough to send her to prison long-term, but enough to leave her with a record that would shadow her for years. Attempted fraud, unauthorized access, conspiracy. Elliot's name appeared right alongside hers. I didn't celebrate. There was no joy in watching someone I once thought I loved destroy herself. But there was relief. Relief that I had seen the truth in time, that I had gathered proof, that I had walked away intact. In the months that followed, I rebuilt. Sold the apartment we had once shared dreams of decorating. Moved into a quieter neighborhood. Focused on work. People whispered, of course. Some colleagues looked at me with pity, others with respect. But I carried myself forward, head high, because I hadn't been broken. And Caroline, the last I heard, she was back living with her parents, estranged from most of her friends. Tessa cut her off completely. Her reputation in our circle was ruined. She had tried to take half of everything, and instead she lost it all. That morning, when she smirked and said, "Half of this is mine now. Walk away and watch me take it all," she believed it. She believed she had me cornered. But lies can't hold forever. Not against truth. Not against evidence. And so, on the day that was supposed to bind us together, we were bound in a different way. Her to the consequences of her greed, me to the knowledge that sometimes the best decision you can make is to walk away before the damage is permanent.